We did a story a few days ago about a black woman at Morgan State University who wrote a book about black child abuse from black parents to black children. She said it's rampant, wildly out of proportion, way too common. People are hurt, maimed every day. And as I listened to this interview on NPR, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it soon did, which is black child abuse is caused by a history of white racism. Bingo. Then we come to this story out of The Root, this video from the black website, The Root. It's a story about black women being raped. We've actually done this story a couple times. We've done it, the big picture of the enormous level of rape among black women. It's not white guys that are raping them. We've done the story of people being raped on college campuses, black women being raped on college campuses, and how that is hushed up. So I was wondering if this young lady was going to get into this. No, it didn't take her long to explain the whole thing about the silence around black women being raped. Didn't take her long to figure it all out. It was all about a history of white racism. Let's take a little bit of a look at her video, and then let's take a look at some recent stories which try to explain away this ridiculous level of sexual violence among black women.
Conversations about sexual violence and harassment towards women have infiltrated popular culture, the news, heck, they're all over our timelines. And there's one group that's almost invisible when it comes to these conversations: black girls and women. So why are we being ignored? Today's baggage: silencing black sexual violence survivors. Far too often, black women are the victims of sexual violence. Get this, about 1 in 5 black women in the United States have experienced rape in their lives. And just under half of black women said that they experienced sexual violence other than rape. But let's talk about the culture of sexual violence towards black women in America, a country with an unequivocally racist and sexist history.
Yeah. It goes on like that for 9 minutes. And basically, towards the end of the 9 minutes, they start taking these celebrity cases we've seen lately, Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, and saying, well, what about the black women that are victims of these guys? What are we going to do about that? Okay, so this kind of went from a story about rape into a piece of bait click for R. Kelly, the rapper / rapist. That doesn't mean just because she lets him off the hook, that doesn't mean we have to let anybody off the hook. Why don't we look at this recent story from Huffington Post? You know, all the interesting stuff we get here happens in a parenthetical fashion, like somebody sitting there talking about how, well, black women have it bad, really bad, really bad, really bad. Then they say, oh yeah, they're victims of rape by black men, and here's why. I mean, let's when we just take a quick read, just a couple of paragraphs. Relying on police, says Huffington Post, can leave black women facing an impossible quandary. How can they turn a historically racist criminal justice system, one that systematically oppressed their brothers and fathers, to protect them? How indeed. More from the Huffington Post. Many black women are also taught to protect their race at all cost. That means victims of domestic violence may stay quiet to shield their communities from additional negative attention. Quote, people already feel black men are more violent, that black women are loud. All these stereotypes, said one of their experts. You don't want to open your community up for more scrutiny. There's also a general attitude that women should stand by their partners, no matter what, she added. Why? Because the world is hard on black men. Why don't we run over to the LA Times? For African-American rape victims, a culture of silence. There's an old saying in the African-American community: black women raise their daughters and love their sons, a legacy of the atrocity of slavery. It signifies a communal protectiveness of black men from the coddling of toddling boys to a reluctance to report rape and incest. That's from the Los Angeles Times, people. Here's for you numbers freaks. Here's some numbers. Whatever numbers you think you know, they're way, way worse because, as we see here, nobody's reporting rape. We did a story once out of one of these stories that was supposed to be sympathetic to black women, black people. And it said 60% of black women in college are raped before they ever get to college. And 95% of those rapes are never reported. Here's a story from The Nation. Again, they're talking about why don't black women report their experience with sexual assault on college campuses, white or black? Well, we know the answer on black campuses. Here's this story told a couple of, you could do these stories by the hundreds. There's actually been lawsuits about this. Here's a story about a woman whose personal story was complicated by institutional realities. The victim and the assailant are black. Their colleges are affiliated historically black women's and men's colleges. When she reported the assault to her dean, the victim found these institutional traditions in ways that felt further traumatizing to her. The dean questioned her about her wardrobe and her decision-making that night. The victim said her attacker was not a stranger but a friend that she knew for a long time. But the victim was shamed and blamed for agreeing to go out with him alone, and the guy ended up getting away with it. The victim believes the way college administrators responded to her assault reflects long-standing tendencies in the black community to shield black men from interaction with authorities. We always come to these situations where we can't come forward because we want to protect black men or protect our black brothers because they're already fighting against a system that further criminalizes them. Isn't that amazing to hear people just admit that? Isn't that amazing? I mean, they are admitting in spades everything that we say here every day, and we get such pushback on. Same article, why don't we go down to the bottom of that article? 3 years after the victim said she was sexually assaulted, a survivor anonymously described her own experience of sexual assault in a series of tweets on Twitter. Echoing similar sentiments that mirrored this victim's experience, she wrote, "Spellman has taught me to be a free-thinking woman and also to be a woman who has to keep her mouth closed to protect her brothers." Anybody remember Melissa Harris Perry, MSNBC? She was the self-appointed big black queen of MSNBC. Every Saturday morning, she had a 1-hour show. And she would kind of like remind everybody what the black opinion was on this, that, and the other. Well, one time she had a woman on who just written a big article about how sexual violence is an everyday thing in places like Egypt and how she was the victim of it. So Melissa Harris Perry is doing her interview thing and she's kind of like, buying it, but you can tell she was troubled.
Now, so this challenge that you're laying out to me as we're talking is one that feels familiar to some Western civil rights movements as well. So I start with a little bit of trepidation in this conversation, in part because I know that some of the critiques of this is the very idea that Western press, that those who are not from these nations, who are not Muslim ourselves, who are not part of these traditions, can look at your article and say, look at how horrible those men or those societies or that religion is. And it's something, it's part of why, for example, we have an underreporting of rape and domestic violence in African American communities, because we know the violence enacted on black men by police, so we often don't call, right?
Raping black women is wildly out of proportion. Observation, white guys aren't doing it.
Please, sir, I want some more.
But here we have magazine after magazine after magazine that prides itself on being sympathetic to the lovely ladies and their fellas. They're flat out telling us that the fellas have free reign to rape because the women are under enormous pressure not to put their men in jail because, well, there's too many black people in jail right now for no reason whatsoever. We don't want to add some people in there for what? Just a little bit of rape? Hell, that never hurt nobody. Did it? You want to disagree with that? Go ahead. Just get ready to make the black kids angry.